Welcome to Turning Pages, a series of in-depth conversations with authors about their works. All right, well, Michael Redhead Champagne, no stranger to Winnipeg if you are familiar with some of his activism and his speaking, but now a children's author. We Need Everyone, out on Highwater Press, is his debut children's book. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Thank you very much, Michael.
So, I mean, you come from an oral tradition, right? Storytelling-wise, an oral tradition. Was there any kind of like conceptual or like intellectual hurdle to putting things down on paper in this way?
I'm so happy that you started with that question. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I struggled writing the book, and I think that it's important for me just to be honest with folks about the process that I went through. And so I did have people, even years before the book came out, predict that this content was going to be in my first children's book. However, Um, what I was doing, I'm also, as you mentioned, I do a lot of activism around systems and advocacy. So some of my writing is pretty technical. So a lot of my writing sounds like I'm writing, oh, I don't know, maybe a university textbook instead of writing a entertaining children's book. And so it was very difficult for me in the beginning. But what we ended up doing was my business partner, Angie Lamarand, suggested that I make a video of myself talking as if I'm speaking to a group of kids, and we'll record that and then we'll just type that up and maybe the book is in there.
Mm.
So that is what we ended up doing. I recorded a little bit of a talk as I normally would as a public speaker, pretended like I was talking to 100 of my favorite kindergartner kids out there. And out of that, We Need Everyone, the book, emerged. And so that you asked about the oral tradition as the very first question, I think is super cool because, yes, exactly that oral tradition, 100% to get this book made.
That's interesting that you ended up kind of taping it and essentially like performing it to craft what the book would be, because I was curious, like very often when we think of like children's books, they're read aloud by a parent or another loved one.
Yeah, exactly. And so it really, like, I wanted the book to be something that would be read aloud, but also just because I'm somebody who is a speaker myself, I wanted to make sure that it felt authentic to who I am and how I speak. And so this was one way to make sure that it happened.
You mentioned years ago people predicting that the topic would be, you'd write this as a children's book. When did the seeds of this kind of first get planted for you, other than other people seeing it in you?
Well, I actually recently came across a book. You know how when you're in kindergarten and they make you write those all about me books?
Yeah.
And it's like, I can hold, 10 marbles in my hand and my, favorite snack is pizza. Those types of things. I stumbled upon one of those books, and in addition to those very uh interesting facts about my childhood, talking about my favorite blanket and whatnot. Oh, and my least favorite sibling. Wow, I was a little
Ouch.
cranky 6 year old. But we'll just leave that one in the past. But in the book, it even said, "What do I want to be when I grow up?" And I said, "I want to be a writer." I was 6 years old at the time of writing that book, and I had no way of knowing that fast forwarding 30 years into the future, that prediction of that 6 year old Michael would come true in 2024.
Did you even like? Can you think back that whether you had like a full concept of what a writer, what that meant? Like, were you just super into books?
Well, I think what happened with me, and I think a lot of kids that are introverted probably can relate to this. I wasn't always this talkative. When I was younger, I was quite quiet and reserved. And so my safe spaces in the schools that I would go to was always the library. And so going to the library all the time really allowed me to feel like being around books was my safe place. And when I'm reading books and I'm in the story, that's an even safer place. And I thought that that was so magical that if these random strangers that I never met before can create a place of safety for me in my hectic world, then wouldn't that be so great if I could also create a place of safety in this hectic world for others too.
It's interesting you talk about finding a place of safety because this book ultimately is about kind of finding a place, just period.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And I think really the book is based around activity that I do in some of my talks, like the one that I recorded that it's based on, where I ask students to think about and reflect upon some of the things that they like doing. And I ask them to list a few things that they do like. And inevitably, when folks list off the things that they like doing, they are going to mention one, two, or maybe even all three of tasks of things that they have natural or intuitive skills in. So when folks are talking about the things that they like doing, maybe they like drawing. Well, guess what? They're probably a super gifted artist. And if that's the case, then I hope that this book can encourage that person who is just getting started drawing, or maybe they just feel good when they're drawing, will encourage them to lean into that artwork or lean into the gift that they have. Because when I was little, I was told that I talk too much. I don't know if you've ever come across this in your life, Michael. You're a radio person. So you probably come across a bunch of radio people who like to talk. Um, I'm one of those people who likes to talk, and I was told so much growing up that I talk too much. And so now, as an adult, being a public speaker, knowing that it's my career to speak, I think back to being told when I was too much. And I just want this book to be a message to all those kids that are out there that are told that they're too much. Maybe you're not too much. Maybe you just need to be self employed and make a new career for yourself based on your gifts and your abilities.
Yeah,
And
I
maybe
mean,
the world will be a better place for it.
the definitely the thing that you point out in terms of like making that list is things you like doing, right? It's not necessarily things you're good at. It's not the way that that's framed. That do you derive enjoyment from this? Because ultimately, if you're going to do it, it should be something you enjoy.
Exactly. I think the whole point here is I want people to be able to share their gift in a way that is beneficial for their own mental health and their own wellness, but also when they become so skilled in something, why do we call it a gift? Because gifts are for giving away. And so, you have that skill, and I hope that you would share that with the folks around you. Even if you are someone like me who talks too much, maybe some people need to hear your voice. Maybe you're somebody who, even in the book, there's a section in there that talks about different types of gifts that we need. So I talk about how we need artists and we need athletes and we need storytellers. And I think those ones are expected. But also in the book, I even say things like we need gamers and we need good friends. And sometimes people will ask me about that and say, "What do you mean we need gamers? Games are rotting my children's mind. Why are you encouraging this behavior?" And so for me, and I think for many of us, we can look at the skills that are being developed when children are playing games. And when we take a look at the increasingly digital and computerized world that we're living in, I think it doesn't take that much of a leap for us to think that the skills that children are generating when they're playing games can be utilized and applied in the very, very near future in terms of how not only technology is going to develop, but just how whole systems and our entire community is going to interact with one another. So I see the gifts that children are carrying as a possibility to change the world for the better, even if it's something like gaming.
I'm glad you mentioned the gamers one because that was one I wanted to ask you about. Is this a position that you had immediately, or is this something you came around to in terms of the value of gamers?
Well, I think it came about because, like I said, it's an activity that I do often with students, and often students would say they would list the things that they like doing, and a lot of the time, gaming would be one of the things that they like doing. But the next step of the activity is where I say you have to pick one of those that you're good at. And so, a lot of students would say, "I'm good at gaming," and it doesn't even have to just be gaming, but for a kid to be able to say, I'm good at blank, and to say it with confidence, with their full chest, to believe it in their heart, I think is absolutely critical for good, sound mental health for kids and teens. They should be able to say, I am good at blank. It helps us combat that low self-esteem that so many folks are struggling with, right? Where they feel like they're not good at anything. Um, I think that when we identify their gift and remind them of what their gifts are, that really it changes the neurons in our brain. It's those pathways that are always kind of reminding us that we're sometimes their negative self-talk. Hopefully, this reminder of your gift and what you're good at can rewire a little bit of that so that you start saying to yourself, I am good at something. And the way we talk to ourselves, hopefully over time, will change. And that will also become more positive.
Was it important then to mention gamers because the like flack that they can get from parents or from adults in terms of like dismissing, oh, you're good at this but this thing is worthless?
Yes. And I also mentioned it because I wanted to put a spotlight and a little bit of pressure on gamers themselves as well to think about how can my skills and my gifts in gaming, how can that help my future? How can that help my community? How can that help my potential career someday? And so I love being able to have those conversations with students and teachers and groups because we really don't know. Like, like the top jobs that exist today didn't exist 20 years ago because of the advances and the rise of technology and computerization of things and algorithms. And so what I see in the future is that those gamers that have that tech savvy, that ability to analyze an algorithm or, ride those digital waves, we're going to need those folks to help us navigate the world of the future in many, 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 many different ways. And so it really came about because the kids were telling me my gift is gaming, and I wanted to honor and respect the voice of those young people.
Yeah, it's interesting. It got me thinking because I'm the father of several kids, and some of the games I was like, yeah, absolutely, like a Lego game where there's like a collaborative like puzzle solving nature. It's like, okay, this makes sense that you have to figure out how to work together to succeed, right? That like that skill is a transferable skill to kind of the real world. And then I kind of dismissed Fortnite for quite a while because it just seemed to be like you just go around like trying to eliminate everyone else, which it seemed like capitalism and its excesses.
Yeah,
Uh,
I know what you're saying.
but then some of my kids have gotten into there's like kind of duos or team ones, and like they're talking to each other online as they play and kind of like strategizing and stuff. And I was like, oh, there is some like social aspect to this that isn't like nihilistic.
Yeah, and even like specifically with Fortnite, there were even forget which school division it was, but they even got knowledge keepers, First Nations knowledge keepers, to come and actually make avatars to be in the game and set up like a village, and the kids could come and learn about reconciliation and indigenous knowledge inside of Fortnite. And so, like, these are the examples of the transformative and educational potential that rests within gaming that, I think that we would be smart as adults and educators to pay attention to and see what kind of connections we can make there.
Yeah, my 10-year-old did Minecraft in class, and they like they looked at architecture, and so then they had to figure out like math and engineering, and then they had to build essentially a society within the system. And so then they're talking social studies, they're discussing history, and the capacity for this to be kind of like a multi-stream education tool, it fascinated me.
No, it's super cool. It was Louis Riel's school division, and it actually was Minecraft
Okay,
that they built it in. So I was getting my games confused. Forgive me, all the gamers listening.
sure enough.
Um, yeah, no, I love when we can do those types of things because it really I see education and learning happening everywhere, and if we can share positive messages and mental health and you know those types of things, in a game where kids are willingly choosing to put their attention, time, and energy, then I think that's just going to end up being good for everyone.
You'd mentioned before about, if someone was a talented artist, that, that could be one of their skills. You worked with a talented artist on this book, Tiff Bartel. How did that come
I
about?
worked with the most talented artist on this book. Tiff Bartel is amazing.
So how did that come about, and what was that process like in terms of the collaboration?
Well, when I was connecting with the publishers over at Highwater Press, those are the folks that published the book. We were planning out what do we want the book to look like? How do we want this to evolve? And something that has always been really important for me is to make sure that I'm supporting and lifting up women and gender diverse folks in the work that I do. And so I asked the publishers if they could share with me kind of a short list of illustrators that were women of color or indigenous women, or gender diverse folks, so that I could take a look and see which of those cartoon illustrators styles resonated with me. And I obviously ended up going with Tiff Bartel. But the reason I did select the Tiff Bartel look and style is because I've never been able to see an illustrator capture my energy and enthusiasm on the flat page before. But Tiff Bartel magically has done so. And so you'll notice that the pictures that are included in the book are very, very colorful. They're very vibrant. When people find and discover their gifts in the book, it's represented by a star. And these types of symbolism are really important to me just because it's bright, colorful, and I think speaks visually to folks. But even just there are secret messages that are hidden within the art that I think Tiff did just such a beautiful job doing. For example, my favorite animal is narwhals, so there are some secret narwhals in the book.
Why narwhals?
I always just like narwhals. They're the unicorn of the sea. And I remember when I was a little kid, I'm like, there's no way that this animal is real because I learned about unicorns before I learned about narwhals. And I'm like, if unicorns aren't real, narwhals clearly are not real. But then they were real, and it really stuck with me as a kid. And now I really love. Even a book series called Narwhal and Jelly, for kids that I actually enjoy quite a bit. Um, but yeah, narwhals are just my favorite, and Tiff was able to integrate some of that into the book. But I don't just love narwhals; I also love my own pet.
I was
My
gonna
cat
say she
Sushi is in the book.
integrates your book, your cat Sushi Meowth. Meow? Is it Meowth?
Yes. Meowth, yes. And his last name, Meowth, came about as a result of the way he meows. I think some of us who are cat owners will know that cats have their distinct vocal style. And so Sushi, when he meows, sounds like he puts an F at the end of his meow. Meowth.
There you
So
go.
that's why we call him that.
Yeah, you
And yeah,
mentioned.
so
Sorry,
he's included in the book.
you mentioned the energy that Tiff brings to it. It does have like a vibrancy, not just with the colors, but like the expressions on everyone's
Yes.
faces. Like, was that like? Did you talk to Tiff about that, or did that just like hand the kind of text to her and let her kind of come up with things?
Well, we had like a couple of meetings just to brainstorm the vision of what we wanted. But really, Tiff took so many creative uh, decisions and made so many creative choices as she was designing the book. One thing that I always like to mention is that Tiff was pregnant during most of the drawing of this book. And so I like to just mention that I can really feel the maternal love. This feels like a mama made this book. And it's because a mama did make this book, Tiff, while she was pregnant. And so I just love the energy she was able to share in this book because I feel like every time I read it, it brings me back to a 10 out of 10.
So then maybe in the same way that you were imagining, 100 of your favorite kindergartners, she was imagining, reading this to her future child and them looking at the images and
That's
responding
what I
to them.
imagine.
I do want to go back to the oral storytelling thing, just because I have one more question about kind of putting this on the page, and that is, when you're a public speaker, maybe you have a time limit, but you don't have quite the economy of words that you have in a children's book, right? Like you have to be
Mhm.
like really direct in your messaging, and like it's usually a much shorter amount of text that you have to include. And I'm curious if that created like its own set of problems in terms of like how you hone your message, or like what word choices you have when you have limits.
So something that I say to myself before every speech, and this is maybe good tips for anyone who has to do speeches. Or maybe it's not a good speech. I don't know. Maybe it's just a good tip for me. But when I'm giving a speech, I always tell myself, if this was the very last time I ever gave a speech, and tomorrow I retire and I never give another speech again, what do I want my audience to be left with? So what that does for me is that creates an element of like it prioritizes all of the thoughts in my head when I think about it like that. And the things that are not important kind of fall away. And the things that are most important rise to the top of my attention. And so then it becomes easy for me to be like, these are the things I just need to focus on. Because I'm just trying to think from my heart. If this is my message from my heart to this audience, what is the message? And sometimes I have to do that because it gets my head out of the way. Because sometimes it's my thoughts and my thinking that complicates things. But when I think about it from my emotions and my heart, then the choices become easy and the words come quick.
So it's almost like a mindfulness exercise that like honing, like when you're clouded with a lot of thoughts, this like narrows things down and just kind of hones in on kind of the core of those thoughts.
Yeah, yeah, I guess when you describe it like that, that really is exactly what I'm doing because as I'm trying to do that kind of prioritizing, I'm just asking myself the question of what do I want to, what is most important on my heart? And that's, I think, I don't think a lot of us ask ourselves that question in very specific moments. So if, for you, Michael, if you're ever going to have to do a speech in front of a group of people, maybe give it a shot and just ask yourself, what does my heart really want to say to this group of people? It might clear up the thoughts that you have in your head.
It also seems to kind of tie back to the book in terms of the drilling down, like what do you like, and then what are you good at from amongst that list of three, like a process of winnowing or like narrowing of the aperture to kind of like get at the core of the message.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's important for us to be able to start when we're trying to inquire or get to any type of answer, to start with questions that are approachable and not intimidating. And that's why the first question is, what do you like doing? It's not starting by like, describe to me all of your gifts and talents, right? We want to begin with the question of what do you like doing, just so that folks are able to feel at ease and can speak honestly. And then once they have their honest answers out on the table, then we kind of move into the head of like, okay, out of these things, which one do you feel like you have the most skills in? And then it kind of moves us from the enjoyment, heart, what do you like doing portion to the thought, thinking, the critical thinking side where, okay, which of these do I actually have technical skill in?
It also seems like
And then, yeah,
an apt way
then
to
we share it.
approach things because with kids, they often have like really big questions.
Yeah.
And it's like, how
Oh,
do you
yeah.
begin to answer this? Well, you have to kind of like take a piece of it or get at the heart of what they're asking.
Yeah, and I think like the big questions or the big comments really that have made this activity so important to me are when I hear, and I mentioned it earlier, but when I hear kids saying things like, I'm not good at anything, or even when kids say, I'm bored, right? To me, that's an expression that um, their mind is thirsty, right? They need to drink something, they need to do something, they need some water in their brain. Um, and that's where the gift activity comes from, because I always tell folks that if you feel bored or if you feel like you're not good at something, then do this gift activity. And once you figure out what your gift is, then you practice your gift. You don't have to share it with people, but you practice it. And as you practice that, you know, the science, the dopamine of the brain, you're doing something that you're good at. Your brain will be happy. You will be happy. And eventually your skills will improve to the point where you're like, oh, I want to share this with the world. And again, your community around you likely would benefit very deeply from having more folks out there sharing their unique gifts and talents with the world. We need more artists. We need more athletes. We need more storytellers. We need more gamers. And so that's the message of the book.
And ultimately, we need everyone.
We need everyone. Exactly.
Well, it's a thought-provoking book, and I really hope that it spurs a lot of conversations with the children, its audience. Michael Redhead Champagne, thanks very much for joining me here on the show, and congratulations on the book.
Thank you so much. And congratulations to you for doing these deep dives into books every show. I really love it.